Hi everyone, today I've got a really interesting Midjourney workflow for you to create really compelling illusions, and not those spirals that have been going around everywhere. Although I am also going to show you a technique to be able to attain those spirals natively within Midjourney. Okay, abracadabra, let's dive in. So I've always been a big fan of illusion photography, things like, forced perspective or double exposure, such as this image. I believe this is called The Other Face of Paris. Or on the art side, the works of MC Escher or the famous L'Amour de Peru, which I know I just butchered, so French speakers go ahead and yell at me in the comments. And while Midjourney does have a pretty great imagination, if you do just prompt it something like optical illusion at a aspect ratio of 3:2, you get this, which is cool. It's not very optical illusion-y, but it's neat. But even trying to come up with something that resembles the poster to the 2005 film The Descent, which was clearly inspired by Salvador Dali's photograph, which I can't show here, but you can Google. But if you give Midjourney a prompt, something along the lines of female figures forming the image of a skull, it just does not get what you're looking for. There are, of course, the usual tricks of image prompting, but I think this technique unlocks a lot more creativity, experimentation, and ultimately will lead to a cooler result. So the key to the whole thing is actually in very subtle. I know it's like the least popular of the varies. So let's start by just generating a skull. So this is painting of a skull at an aspect ratio of 16:9. Once you have your skull generated, just hit the very subtle button. Make sure you leave the same aspect ratio, otherwise things get really screwy. So, and I'm just going to prompt for a photograph of dancers. And sure enough, in just a few minutes, we have these cool images. Yeah, they're really pretty neat. I will note that the illusion does tend to work best kind of the further away you are from it. As you get closer to the image or have the image kind of blown up, the illusion does fall apart a little bit, but that is just part of, illusions. Now, a helpful tip if you're running into issues where you're not getting anything near what you're looking for is to try to utilize the stop command. For example, here's an image that I rolled up in full resolution. This is close-up painting of a green eye at 16:9. But when I ran a vary on it with the prompt a landscape painting, these were the results that I got, which weren't really what I was looking for. Actually, number 3 isn't too bad, but overall, yeah, this wasn't quite what I had intended. So taking the same prompt, but adding in a -- stop of 20 gives us kind of this blurry mess. But if you add a vary onto it, where I gave it an additional prompt of surreal painting, and we ended up with this, which is pretty cool. It kind of looks like the album cover of like a 70s prog rock band. And trust me, I know my 70s prog rock album covers. So you can image prompt within your subtle vary for some pretty interesting results. We're gonna look at that in 1 second. But first, I wanted to show you a little bit of the rabbit hole that I went down via MC Escher's relativity. So I think we all know this piece. It was obviously very influential to Christopher Nolan in Inception. So I decided to use it as an image reference in Midjourney and then run it with just the prompt MC Escher and ended up with these, relatively inspired by images. I wanted to see what would happen if we ran a vary of, say, New York City streets on, I think the prompt was photograph New York City streets. And we ended up with these, which look pretty cool. I think they're kind of more in a very busy kind of double exposure style than a true optical illusion. Nonetheless, I wanted to show these to you because I think they're kind of cool and definitely worth exploring further. There were a couple more, I would say, not great results. They're interesting. They're definitely leaning closer into Escher at this point, but I wouldn't exactly call this either illusionary or very compelling. So that led to the idea of reversing the sources. So I took MC Escher's relativity, ran it as a describe to get 4 separate text prompts from Midjourney. As we've learned, describe doesn't give you an exact prompt that Midjourney understands, but it does pull a number of keywords and tokens from the image that Midjourney might understand. So now generating kind of a blurry mess. This is a painting of a lamp at an aspect ratio of 3:2 with a stop of 40. Generally, you're going to want to experiment with stops between 20 and 50. For this, I went with 40. We hit very subtle and then added in one of Midjourney's describes based off of the MC Escher piece. And that got us here, which I thought was pretty cool. It might have lost a little bit of the idea of the lamp, but you can definitely see it is there. And the overall structure of the piece has a very Escher-inspired look to it. So I felt that I was kind of on a roll with Escher, so I generated this up. This is close-up photo of a model at an aspect ratio of 3:2. And then using another one of the described prompts, I ended up with these images, which were pretty awesome. But I will say that the order in which you vary definitely does play a large part in this whole process. For example, I ended up just running the prompt that we got from the describe. So taking that image and running a very subtle with the prompt a model's face, which is what we generated our initial model face with, we ended up with this monstrosity. So yes, these definitely do not work as an illusion. They don't really work as images either. They're actually fairly terrible. But I very much like this technique because it gets you into the mode of experimentation and exploration. One thing that I have noticed is that the results generally work best if you use very simple iconography. So don't use a lot of busy imagery in your initial image. For example, this was a photograph of a light bulb, very, very simple. And my initial idea was to try to merge it with the painting of a wolf, but yeah, it didn't come out that impressive. Here were some other attempts. You know, you could see where it was going with the idea, but it just really wasn't pulling it off. Interestingly, in image number 4, that kind of gave me an idea though, in that the wolf looks like it's kind of coming out of a campfire, which led to these 4 images, which admittedly are still not great. But once I reached here, I really started to think about the concept and idea of a light bulb. Like, what is it? It's warmth, it's light, it's knowledge. And that led me to a subtle vary of a man reading a book. And while this is not a perfect image, I do think that conceptually it is pretty solid. Now, overall, obviously there are some problems with this. His hand is kind of a mess here, and then the wrist and the ankle meeting is pretty awkward. But I think overall, the concept of it is really, really solid. And it's something that I didn't even know that I was looking for when I first started down the path with this light bulb. I read it a few more times and got some pretty interesting imagery out of it. For example, this image where, I don't know, moths? I guess moths? I don't know why. That book was really, really old, I guess. And then there was this depressing classroom again with the moths. Oh, moths to light. I get that. Oh, wow. Midjourney. Wow. That just really blew my mind. And I think really illustrates exactly what I like about this process so much is that when you're in this sort of intentional exploratory phase, Midjourney is just going to throw you some curveballs that you did not see coming. So anyways, I will say this is a very cool technique and very, very much worth exploring. You will end up rolling a ton of duds, but when it hits, it will really hit. So rounding out quickly with the spiral technique that's going around everywhere. Now, the typical way that you would end up doing this is to use Stable Diffusion, or you could go to Hugging Face and use Illusion Diffusion HQ. That has been super, super slammed lately. In fact, anytime that I've tried to run it, this is just a beach at sunset with this kind of swirly pattern. I continuously end up with errors because the server is just getting slammed. But Chase Lean over on Twitter developed a method of getting the spiral within Midjourney natively. Now, this isn't quite as subtle as the standard Stable Diffusion version, but I think it kind of has a cool look all of its own. So in order to attain this, you'll need to prompt a hypnotic spiral or whatever kind of kaleidoscopic shape you would like, comma black and white, dash dash style raw, dash dash stylize 0. And you should end up with something that looks like this. Now we're back again to very subtle. Now here's the trick is that apparently Niji works the best. So your prompt style will want to be whatever you're prompting, dash dash Niji, dash dash style scenic, dash dash stylize 1000. Your initial output won't look anything like what you are aiming for. So you're going to have to run that same vary over and over and over again, and it will eventually get there. Now I will say that I gave it a shot, but I ended up kind of giving up around 1, 2, 3. I ended up giving up around 10, varies and upscales. And I got here. So yeah, you can see that it was coming along. I just kind of got tired of doing it. So it's an idea. It's a way that you can get these spirals within Midjourney. And again, I do think that it kind of has a cool look all to itself. At some point, I'm sure that someone will release some kind of app where you can just put the spirals right on your Midjourney images, like Insight Face or Trace Journey. But, for now, this is a way to make it happen. So that's it for today. I thank you for watching, and I do thank our supporters for supporting. My name is Tim.